chat. Let's
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 go.
let's
Let's
get
go
into
for
this. So,
it.
I'm like, I think when we first chatted a little bit, like about a year ago, I was like so fascinated by your background because you do some acting as well as like you're in HR. So I'm like, Patrick's doing so many cool things. But I would love for you to just like share, a little bit about who you are, what you're up to, what you're excited about, all those things. What you got going on, Patrick?
Sure. So I am Patrick or Patrick O'Donis, Patrick Sutton, depending on what day it is and what I'm promoting. But I think
Okay.
regardless, it's all wrapped into one. I'm a people and culture enthusiast, leader in tech, believe in people first for the culture, and I'm also a filmmaker, a screenwriter.
Mm,
I created a amazing web series, and it is streaming on multiple platforms.
love it.
And I consider myself to be the Issa Rae Jr. of low budget web series, but it
Yes.
has heart. It has heart, and
Yes.
it has representation in many facets. And so,
Mm.
in a nutshell, that's kind of who I am. I'm just a multi hyphenate that can really plays up his strengths as a creative in both the HR tech space and in the creative film space.
I love that. Well, you didn't even say the name of the the web series. Come on now, it's Scales, right? I
Oh,
know. I did a little
it's
research.
it's called Scales. Yes,
Yes.
Scales. Scales the web series. It's all about balance. It's about balance. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, tell. Like, I want to know more. I'm not even gonna lie. I watched the interview you did.
pilot. Oh,
Just talking. Yeah, talking about Scales. Um, and I'll after this I'm for sure gonna to watch it for sure. But I would love to learn a little bit more about like tell the people what it is so you can get some more views on that thing.
sure. So Scales is the I always tell people it's the what if Insecure and Noah's Ark and Queer as Folk had a child, and Scales
Mm,
is what you'd get, because I do say that it is an LGBTQ plus centered show, but it's
mm,
also a human centered show. And I say that
mm,
because the stories are relatable to everyone. It doesn't matter your sexuality. I
mm,
wanted to create content and tell stories with characters that were entertaining and interesting, but also that were relatable to everyone. And it also removes the stigma behind your who you love or how you love, because I think as
mm,
people we're all just trying to figure it out. So that's why the show's called Scales, because I think we're just
mm,
trying to balance stuff in life. And also because I'm in Atlanta, and when I first moved here, music was everything, and so all of
mm.
the music featured in Scales is by independent artists that you probably
Yes.
would never you wouldn't hear them unless you tuned into Scales. And these are some dope indie artists that can blow, like amazing artists.
Yes. Yes. Actually, indie artists are like some of my favorite. Like going to like a small show, and just like hearing these like local artists because like they haven't been like corrupted by like the main like mainstream, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
Um, because like there's just like the very similar sounds, right? Like when we think about, I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday of just like little baby. There's like 15 little babies like in the industry right now. All of them sound the same, right? And like that pop, like there's like this pop kind of deal or whatever. I love listening to indie artists because like the freedom to be creative, and like shine in like whatever way that you want and combining things that don't necessarily, I would never think to do. Like honestly, I would never think to do. I can't remember young sis's name, but there's one. I think she's I'm gonna mess this up. I feel I can't remember. I can't remember. I'll link it or something like that. But basically, she speaks French, English, and Korean all in the same song, and like mixes like electronic, pop, hip hop, all of it. It sounds really really cool. I was listening to it at the gym. I was like, this is not my flow for the gym, but I would vibe to this any other time. So I just like love listening to like these like indie artists just be them.
When
So
you
that's
find
super
it,
dope.
can you send that to me? Because that sounds
Yes,
hella
yes, yes,
dope. I
yes.
want to hear that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
want to
yeah.
hear
I'll
that.
send it to you.
I
It's
want to
like
hear
I was like, sis, yo, what's going on here? It's super dope. I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you. Let me write that down so I don't forget. Um, but that's super cool. What like inspired you to do something like that or write that story? I'm curious about for scales.
that. There was a lot. There's a lot there that made me want to do it. One, I was always inspired by the creativity of filmmakers. Like
Mm.
when I was in college, I went to Tougaloo College. I'm giving it a shout out. It's a
All right,
small
there it is.
HBCU in Mississippi, and I was one of the first to make a student film. It was a
Oh
horror
wow.
film because I'm obsessed with horror, the genre. And it was kind of like a full circle moment for me to create this because I'd been talking about it for years. Like, oh, I would love to get back into storytelling and all that stuff. But
Mm,
it was August 2017 while I was over in Barcelona, Spain with my best friend for vacation when a
mm,
terrorist attack happened. And it happened there, like
mm,
right where we were. And it literally was one of those moments where my best friend was like, we could have like literally we could have been killed that day, and
mm,
it was like, life is short. And while we were there, I'd been talking about, I just saw, like, I think an episode of Awkwardly Black Girl on
mm,
YouTube. He's like, you keep talking about it, you need to just put it up on YouTube, just create something. And literally
mm,
that night I started writing, because I travel with my laptop. I started writing the
mm.
pilot for Scales. And I remember Issa saying that when you create your content, you usually use some real life experiences. And so
Yeah.
I actually, Scales is loosely based on stories of my own and some of my really good friends from our journey in life and relationships
Mm,
and careers. And that became the sort of the focal point. And once I got back to Atlanta, I my best friend says, okay, you've written this thing, now you need to make it happen. And I was like,
mm.
you know what, I'm gonna do it. So I had auditions, 400 people came to the
Oh my
audition.
gosh, are you
And
serious?
I was like, oh
Oh
god.
my
So
god.
it's kind of like you really have to, you have to do it now because the people
Yeah.
are there behind it. And
What the
yeah,
heck?
it was like I was it was kind of like my year of yes too after that traumatic experience, because
Yeah.
I got back into acting. I'd started doing some local theater, and
Mm,
I was in a play, and the young lady that I was in a play with had just moved here from LA. She just graduated from Berkeley, and she was looking to do some other projects too. And she wanted to get into directing. So I was like, bam,
mm.
I'm working on a web series. Here's this pilot script. What do you think? She was like, I'm in. And so my team
Yes.
was just organically starting to happen. Because remember, I used to say you network across versus trying to go
Yes.
all the way up to the top. And
Yep.
I met this guy named Zane who had just graduated from film school, who had started his own production company. He's Indian and Pakistani. And Scales, I wanted Scales to have that diversity. I want,
Mm,
that diverse input. Ava
mm,
DuVernay was talking about how, like Queen Sugar, she would bring in a different female director to direct episodes. So I knew Shirley,
mm.
my female director, I knew that I wanted that to happen. We met at
Yeah.
a Starbucks, and 5 hours later, the Scales creative crew, that family was born. And here we
Wow.
are,
Wow.
6 years later. We just finished season 4. It's going to premiere this
Amazing.
fall. So
Okay.
it's just been a passion project that evolved into so many things. And there's just
Oh
such
my
great
gosh.
representation in the show that I really love too.
That is like that is such a I love that story so much. I feel like, oftentimes I feel like people forget the process as far as like being creative, producing this idea, dreaming something and like making it happen essentially.
Mhm.
I even think about like this podcast, like the name used to be different, the everything used to be different about this show. And like I had this realization a few weeks ago that like when I was a kid, I literally one of my dreams that I just like let go because I was like, I don't know how much money you can make doing that. I'm not gonna do it. But like I wanted to be like a radio host. Like I wanted to be on the radio. Like that's what I wanted to do. I was like, practicing my silky smooth voice, like yo, you tuning into, it's just doing that. And like I would listen to like, those late night whatever, where people are doing their shout outs to their booze and dedicating songs or whatever. And I like loved it. And it wasn't until like this is year 3 of the podcast, and like I'm like, oh shit, I'm doing it. Like I'm actually doing it, and like people like it, and like, and people want to like support and be on the show. Patrick, thank you, and be on the show and
Yes.
talk to me about like dope stuff. So it's like, I don't know. I love to hear other people's stories about like something that like they just thought about for so long and finally did it, and like now 6 years later, 4 seasons later, 400 people showing up at the first audition later. Like it's just a beautiful thing. I absolutely love
Yeah,
it. Absolutely love it. So
cute.
everybody you better tune into Scales. I'm gonna binge it for and get prepped for season 4 this fall. Amazing. You said everywhere. You can
Absolutely.
find it everywhere.
You can find it. There's limited episodes on YouTube, but if you type up
Okay.
Scales the web series, you can at least get an idea. There are a couple episodes there. I do have seasons 1 and 2 are on a platform called reverytv.com.
Ah,
And
yeah.
I have Quele TV that, Lil Rel, who's the head of comedic or comedy content, is on the board for Quelle TV. Season 1 is there too. Every
Love it.
now and then I'll have I'll just show all 3 seasons, especially as we're getting close to season 4, because season 4 is really, really good. So
Mm.
so if you are, for those of you that are listening, which hopefully it's a lot of you, because this podcast is dope and I did hear some episodes and I love it. So shout
Appreciate
out
you.
to you. I'm giving you,
Appreciate
but
you.
if they check it out more, the full thing will be running later this summer, so people can catch
Mm.
up before season 4 drops, because season 4 is probably the absolute best season
Ah,
I think we've ever done. This season 4 is probably the best. So
all right, I'm super excited. Me and my partner, yeah, we're gonna watch. We're gonna tune in for sure, Patrick.
yeah.
Thank you so much for that. That's not even the main thing that we're talking about today, but like I was just so I was
Love
just so
it.
curious. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to know more. So okay, so well, I'm just gonna flat out like ask it. I know like when I reached out to, we're both part of the Black Speakers Collective, and I reached out to some folks and was like, "Yo, I'm doing this theme, Black masculinity, for the opening theme for the new iteration of the show," and you like were one of the first people to like respond, and so I'm curious, just right off top, like what is it about this topic that like excited you, that you wanted to talk about it? I got my own reasons because I feel like there's just so much toxicity around it. And so like I'm curious for you, like what stuck out to you about like talking about Black masculinity?
The black masculinity is such a it's a hot topic for me,
Mm,
and because I've been in spaces where I even some of my friends that they probably don't even know that what they're spewing is toxic, because
mm,
I think they are, but I also look at it as teachable moments, because I
mm-hmm.
have no problems getting you to a place out of ignorance into
Yes.
awareness. But
Mm-hmm.
I remembered, for me, I remembered the challenge of, like I said, I mentioned, not to, this is not to really talk about Scales, but I remember
Mm,
when I had the premiere for Scales, and audience, we had a full premiere in Atlanta. There was like,
nice.
I think 300 something people came to the premiere, and we did a Q&A afterwards. And I remember this audience member stood up and said, I really like the show. He says, but I'm straight, but um, I like that these characters were like, they were, they may be, part of the LGBT something community, but they were like a man's man.
Mm.
And that really, I was like, what? It was kind of like, it's on those moments, because one, you're on a stage because you're there for a premiere. You don't, it's like, I don't want to put on my James Baldwin hat and like
Yeah,
take you through.
I was about to say I love James Baldwin. Yes, yes.
But it's like, you got to be professional about. But I was like, that's a real problem for me, because
Yes. What the heck?
why say that, and what does black masculinity, like, what does that really
Mm,
even mean, and
mm-hmm.
why is it that you're saying that you have to shout out who you were, saying, oh, I'm straight, straight, straight. Like,
Yeah.
where's the root of that coming from?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's always been something that I remember. I didn't let the conversation go too long with that audience member because again, there were other people with questions, but
Yep.
it
Yep.
made me want to talk more about it with my friends and even with my friends who are heterosexual,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
kind of understand where that comes from and why,
mm,
and there's each one of them had a different story and a different path of
mm,
why they feel it's important to lead with that. And some, it's somewhat painful because again,
yeah.
even as someone who identifies as part of the LGBTQ community, there is something innately in like the nature part of how we as young men, young boys, we're taught to really, like, if you fall off your bike, it's like that's a rite of passage. Oh, you're supposed to ride off
Mm-hmm.
your bike. You're not supposed to cry, or there's
Mm-hmm.
so many things that happen at that age, I think, that really feeds into the trauma that you experience, especially as you get older. I grew up in
Mm-hmm.
Chicago, and I mean,
Mm,
there's just your environment. You weren't
mm-hmm.
allowed to, if you were gonna be, effeminate or had different ways that were less than what is seen as super masculine, you would be
Mm-hmm.
bullied. You would get, all types of things would happen. So it's just I've
Mm,
always wanted to really go there with people to talk
mm,
about and explore, black masculinity, the stem of it. What can we do to change it, if anything? How
yeah.
does society
Yeah.
play into it? What does the media do to counter the issue, or all that kind of thing? So that's why
Yeah.
I wanted to. And then I
I
also, I done my research. I listened to a couple of your episodes. You had the
appreciate
street
you.
cred. I was like, okay, this is not
Yeah.
a Wendy Williams type of podcast. This is
No.
this is good. This is good. So I want to show the
That's why.
support. So
That's honestly, I know that. So, because I do want to come back to that story because there's something interesting about that, in like in parts of it that I relate to, and parts of it that I've unlearned and unpacked, and like for me realized like before, while it was important for me to like put on this affront that like, yo, I just want everybody to know I'm hetero, but blah 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 blah. But anyway, so I uh so I think when me and Reggie, the intern, were talking about this, I think that like there was fear for me because as I'm still like trying to, the reason why I wanted to talk about it is because I want to do like better. And what I don't want to do is cause any levels of harm to well, I don't want to cause a greater level of harm. Like there are parts of myself that I'm like ignorant on. I recognize that. Like I will unintentionally cause some levels of harm, right? And hopefully that I will be lovingly called in. That I ended with that on my opening theme, right? But I think that there is something that like I am seeing and witnessing now that I've grown in like a greater level of consciousness around my own gender, around my own masculinity, femininity, all parts of my own being, that like I just look and I'm like, bro, like this something ain't right about this. Like, and I don't know why like folks cling to these ideas that actually aren't really serving us. Like they really aren't, and there's no really purpose, and they're actually causing more harm, not just to like, they're causing harm to black people, but like, uh it's just so much harm that's being caused. So like the LGBTQ plus community, like I in particular, I've like, as I've made more friends, I've gotten more exposed, as people have called me in, have corrected me, I've educated myself because I don't want to burden anybody. It's just like there's so much harm, and so like we got to have conversations about this and what this looks like, particularly for like cishet men, like y'all, like we've heterosexual men got to figure out, because there's like a toxicity that happens. Anyways, I'm on my own journey, and so I appreciate you going on there with me, and I appreciate that
sure,
you listen to the episodes, and it felt safe enough for you to be here. So I
for sure,
appreciate that.
yes,
I'm not going to go on a whole long whatever, but to go on to talk about the story, it's so interesting that like, and I think you named this, that the person like felt the need to say that like I'm straight,
yeah,
before even complimenting this story that actually doesn't center straightness, like doesn't isn't heteronormative. And like parts of me I see that and I'm like, bro, you didn't even need to do that. Just say what you need. Like, why are you doing that? And I feel like it's both outward, like to show everybody else in the room, but also like inward to show like there's some like level of insecurity there. And like I was talking to my mom the other day, and sorry, I'm gonna land this plane soon. But like I was talking to my mom, and I was like, and she was like, Jonathan, your legs are looking nice. Like your legs are nice, because I was wearing some shorts, and I said, "Thank you, mom. I've been working out. I've been doing a lot of calf raises, all that stuff." And I said, like it's funny. I've had some like of my guy friends like um, say stuff like that to me, and they're like, "Oh, no homo" or something like that. I'm
No
like, bro,
homo,
you don't
right?
have to say that. I say like you actually, it's okay to say like I've been working out or something like that. Like I get it, and it's just and I'm like having this conversation with my mom, and and she's like, well, they have to, and I'm like, no, they don't. Actually, it's fine. Like they're not proving anything to me. There's nothing there. It's so interesting, and so like there's like this. You're so right. Like I'm trying to, as I'm like thinking about my own growth and how upbringing, like when did that point start of like where that was something that was important to me, right? Of like proving that I was like a man, proving that I was a man's man. Was there a point that you realized that for yourself, of like that was important, not for you, but like in society, that you got to be a man's man or whatever, particularly even being black too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again,
Mm,
just like I said, growing up on the west side of Chicago,
mm,
there's just it's a environment, it's a cultural stigma of how you have to show up. Like I think it was Paul Lawrence Dunbar that talked about we wear the mask. So we wear
mm,
these different masks, and we're already wearing, it's one mask we can never take off, and that's our skin color. We're black. But then
mm-hmm,
it's these masks of how you have to present yourself out into the world. You can't,
mm,
it's almost like this innate thing where you can't show emotions about certain things. I remember seeing this kid. He got picked on in school because he was what you, I guess you could say, it was an effeminate young
mm,
boy. And I remembered not, I was frozen because I knew it wasn't right, but I
mm,
didn't say anything while they picked on him in the cafeteria. And
mm.
again, thank God. I always thank God that because I am of a particular age, that we didn't have social media, we didn't have the Instagram, because it just, the damage that would have continued to do if had that been recorded. And
Oh
I
God.
remember years later running into him at a grocery store and apologizing to him for not saying anything. And I told
Wow.
him I was afraid, because if I would have said something, it would have meant that, one, even though he is a part of the LGBTQ plus community, but
Mm.
at that time you didn't, nobody really knew what that was in like 10 years old, 11 years old. But the fact
Yeah.
that to
Yeah.
run into him, I mean, now they do, but back then it was a thing that you really talked about. But to run
Yeah.
into him at
Yeah.
the grocery store, I apologized and I said I think it was because of fear of me not wanting to be seen as weak,
Mm,
when me coming to stand up for you wasn't weak. It really would have been actually strong to do that.
mm-hmm,
But I
mm,
didn't. And then there was just so many, the fear of, I didn't want to be looped into that stigma or being seen less than. And I think
mm.
it was kind of, until he actually, it was just, we had a great moment standing in front of the grocery store. It was like my own healing too, because again,
Wow.
that should have never happened. But that's just how it's kind of like how the environment, that it's just how the world is set up. I mean,
Mm,
and it's unfortunate because again, I don't think there's, I hate to sound so pessimistic, but I don't think there's a cure for it,
mm,
because it's going to continue to generate. I mean, I go on TikTok, I go on to all
mm.
other social media platforms, and you see it, whether like the Met Gala, you see certain, like I think it was Bad Bunny, he wore the white suit with the back cut out, and I saw the comments. Some of them
Mm.
was like cheering it on, but then you saw like really hardcore, and I'm like, it's 2023, like we're
Yeah. Yeah.
still
Yeah.
having these like what do people have to, I've always felt this way. I don't, well, wait, I've always felt this way as an adult. Let me say as an adult.
Okay.
I don't have to prove my masculinity to anyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And to
Yep. Yep. Yep.
me, that validates because I know who I am. And if you
Mm-hmm.
think that, oh, well, I'm feminine or whatever, I don't care because I know that I'm a good person, a decent person. I know that there are things
Mm-hmm.
that make me emotional. Steel Magnolias with Sally Fields and Julia Roberts brings tears to my eyes to this day. And I own it and I talk
Mm-hmm.
about it.
Yes.
Philadelphia
Yes.
with Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington brings tears to my eyes. I own
Yes.
it. I talk about it. And I think
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing wrong with being able to show those kind of emotions. And it's like, why do we feel like being emotional and being vulnerable is a sign of weakness? Because if you think
Mm-hmm.
about it, if we were if this world was set up to where there was no such thing as we if where you or not being judged because you allow yourself to be vulnerable and you allow yourself to express the pain and hurt that you have, I think one,
Mm-hmm.
it would eliminate so much of the black on black crime. It would also
Mm-hmm.
maybe derail the stigma of cops seeing black as evil or black men as
Mm-hmm.
bad because we're able to, like, it would have changed that whole culture norm of black is so bad because we could just be able to be in a space where we are allowed to say, I hurt, I cry, I don't
Mm-hmm.
have to be so tough, I
Yeah.
can let my guard. I can, when I hurt, I hurt. There are a lot of men that are now adult men that unfortunately didn't grow up in a household where they could get hugs or where they could talk about
Mm-hmm.
their feelings. And so then they have to kind of let society determine their feelings for them. And then they act out
Mm.
when things happen. So
Yeah. Yeah.
let me land that plane. I'm
That's
sorry, I was going way, taking us all over the
it's
world.
all good. It's all good. I love long stories. I yeah, something that like kept coming to mind as you were sharing, it's like this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there is like the hypermasculinity is like an overcorrection because like folks don't want to be seen as weak. And I think, well, let me just ask it as a question. Like, do you think that, masculinity, being seen as less masculine or being seen as more feminine, like, is that seen as being weak? Is that seen as, seen it? Yeah, there it is. Do you feel like it's just being seen as weak?
I think society has that pressure that says that it's weak. But I mean, me
Mm,
personally, I don't. I would much rather have a person in my life who, and I have friends of all sexualities.
mm-hmm,
That when we talk, I remember I was having a really bad day a few years ago, and I went to a really good friend of mine's who just was like, "I'm going to give you a hug,"
mm,
and it was like just two friends hugging. It was empathy.
mm-hmm.
Empathy isn't a
Yeah,
weakness, and I think,
yeah.
and if it has to go on record, now listeners, I want you guys to hear this. He does identify as a heterosexual male, but
Mm-hmm,
he also grew up in a household where you could get the hugs, and
mm,
mom and dad said it's okay to have empathy. That's not seen as a weakness. And I think that too goes into, we have to erase these stereotypes in trying to say what proves proof of you as, you know, being masculine. I mean,
mm.
I think it's just absurd. What's wrong with just being a well balanced individual? If something hurts you,
Yes.
Jonathan, and you say something, I should be able to say, Jonathan, I'm sorry that that happened to you, and I
Mm-hmm.
will keep you in my prayers. That's not
Yeah.
weak. That's not that. That's just one person to another just saying, I hear you. I hate that that's happening, and I'm thinking about you in a way of healing and helping you. Not, oh, I'm thinking of you
Mm-hmm.
in a way, oh, I'm trying to get your number. Like that's dumb, or it's just
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
absurd. It's kind of it's weird.
It truly is absurd. It's kind of weird that that's always the thought that some folks go to. It's like, bro, I just care about you as a human being. Like it really is just being human. Um, and I think back to like even and just being black, it also adds like another layer to it. It
Mm-hmm.
it, it feel like there are so many. as you said earlier, like ways that society tries to dictate how us as black men should feel, should be, exist. And like I feel like for somebody who is trying to be more compassionate, trying to be empathetic, trying to not allow society or the world to dictate how I choose to exist, and be fully comfortable and confident in me, um, it can be really, really hard sometimes. I feel like, so there's, even as an adult, I feel really secure in myself. Like, even when, I'll look some of my uncles dead in the face and I'll be like, I love you. And I won't add anything to it. And they're like, I love you too. That's it. And like, like I'll let my like hug linger because I'm like, I truly missed you. You know what I'm saying? It just be all right with like that and like, oh, stop that, man. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna stop loving you. You want me to stop loving you? Like, it's
Yeah.
so interesting. Um, but for you, how do you feel like even just like blackness, that layer, that added layer, like may add to that, if at all, when we think about
Well, I think
masculinity?
the layer of the blackness, that's the part where I don't want to mix up my quotes, but it may have been Baldwin, but it may not have been Baldwin, who said like to be black in America is to be in a state of rage all the time. And I
Yeah, that's
don't know
Baldwin.
if
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
is that Baldwin too. Okay,
Yeah, it is. Yep.
so it's like that part of the blackness is part of the infrastructure to why there's this force of nature that we're trying to juggle in our black
Mm-hmm.
skin because we do have to in a way assert ourselves a different way in
Mm-hmm.
society that has to um, balance multiple lines. Like we want to make sure that we appear non-aggressive, but we
Mm-hmm.
also want to make sure that we appear like like yo, what's up? Like
Yeah.
it's unfortunate because you have to juggle. There's so many
Mm-hmm.
different masks that we have to put on that
Mm-hmm.
there's so much of the generational historical trauma that we're having to sort of navigate through, plus trying to accept who we are as individuals, the human side,
Mm-hmm.
yet
Yeah.
still deal with the outside forces of the world, with the different the cop killings that we see, the January 6th that we saw happen, and like that too was trauma of us witnessing what was happening, knowing, and
Mm-hmm.
again, that's the blackness. It's we
Yeah.
recognize that in this world there is a class system, and being a certain color, you're put in a different class, and you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
balance all of that while still trying to sometimes your cup either runneth over or your cup is on
Mm-hmm.
E because you're like, I don't have anything else to give. So I'm angry. And so when you're angry, all you can give is the hyper masculine, the toxicity, because you're just like, I have zero F's to give to be
Mm-hmm.
sensitive in this world that's not giving me the hugs.
Yeah.
They're not giving me the hugs and telling me it's going to be okay. There's a target on my back at all times. And so if I let my guard down, then I'm going to be seen this way. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's really a long saga that,
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan, I mean, I don't know. Like
Yeah.
I literally don't know. That's why I was like, I don't want to be a pessimistic, but I just don't know. But blackness, it carries, it's like a Tetris game. It's hard trying to
Mm.
figure out the pieces.
Yeah. That's such a, it's a really good point. And like the weight of being black, like is just an added layer, um, that the word is not overcomplicates. It is, I want to say convoluted. It's just like there's so much there, right? And I think you shared it too, of just like, yeah, I am simultaneously seen as like, I can't be angry because if I'm seen as angry, then I'm seen as like this brute, right, or this monster. Even though I'm not doing anything, I'm likely seen as that already. And then there's the other part where I'm like, if I'm too like soft or bubbly or like, smiley or whatever, like I'm not really taken seriously. are even seen as professional. And so like there is a very, very, very fine line that I feel like I at times in my life have been forced to like walk, and anytime I've crossed that even slightly, right? Like I particularly in predominantly white spaces that I have been like immediately I feel like all eyes are on me, right? Um and I think the freest I have been is like in recent years where I'm just like I'm not trying to be or exist or live for anybody else but me. And so what I would say, because I feel like there's some people that be like, well, I disagree because I just am not a compassionate person. I don't know. And I'm like, all right, I okay, all right, you can grow in compassion, like you can grow in your emotional intelligence, whatever. But like, you don't have to like lean into that, right? Like uh, you can be, you know, whatever it is like the stereotypical like black maleness is. But like what I think what I would argue with some folks is that that is not the way to be. That is not the only way to be. And I feel like that is often what we are told, what is communicated to us. Like there is only one
Mhm.
way of being. Um and I don't want to be that way. Like that's not me. My natural inclination actually is to nurture, is to care. Like that is that personally that is me, because I truly care about people. I truly love people, and I want other people to thrive. And I love hearing people's stories. And so, like, as I have embraced more of like who I am, I think I have just become more free in understanding that my black masculinity, like how I choose to show up in the world, is different. And I respect other people, but like it's just wild that like people have so many weird, odd things to say because they are unprocessed, ignorant, maybe insecure, haven't had that space to be. There's so many different reasons. It's nuanced, but yeah, I think that that's been my own journey, and I think it's been a good one more recently, but it's been a it's been a hard one I think to get to this point. To be honest, if I'm being absolutely honest with you, it's been very difficult to be here and like be confident in this way.
Wow,
Yeah,
well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, that takes like this
yeah,
is the blueprint. Like other people need to hear that, like understand that journey that you've been on, and
mm,
that sharing of that, like that knowledge is power. And I think
yes,
when you, it's only when you choose to ignore it, that you have to always make sure that you stand out with the identifying who you are, and then
mm,
two, with the stigma behind the no homo, because again, that was a big word that we would use in high school. Like
mm-hmm,
I was on the basketball team, and things had but up, but no homo. Like it was
yeah,
like you can't. It's like get in the
yeah,
base, and you gotta make sure
yeah,
you say that to protect
yeah,
every single thing. Versus
yeah,
I being comfortable now in your own skin to be able to just, this is just, I'm just a person that genuinely just cares about just a decent human being. Like you just want to be a
yeah.
decent human being in the world. That's it.
Bro, I just want to be. Can I just be, bro? Like, I want to frolic in some goddamn flowers, and then I will
Yes.
go hoop right after. Like, I just want to be, you know?
Yes. 100%.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, I think for me, as I'm thinking about it, there are still some things that I am trying to explore and trying to wonder. And I think the biggest question for me is like, biggest question for me. I know you said you don't want to be a pessimist, but like, how do we fix? Not fix because we can't like fix it. But like, I don't know. How do we get more comfortable? How do I get more comfortable? I think that's the question for me. I'm curious for you. Are there still questions that you're like processing when it comes to like your blackness and masculinity for yourself?
Oh wow, that is a Jonathan. That's an Oprah Winfrey question. Um, to be honest, when it comes to the blackness, I never question that. Like I
Mm,
know that I am black, and I know who
mm,
I am. I know the legacy in which I come from, in
mm,
terms
mm,
of the greatness that exists did before me, the people that, like I recognize who I am. And I think that's a superpower. Like when you can
Mm,
truly
mm.
own who you are. I understand. And but the thing is too, very similar to like what you mentioned. This was a journey for me in terms of owning the blackness, because for me, I had to own the blackness. I had to own my sexuality, being the black gay man, like that
Mm-hmm.
black gay, the man, like it was just a whole
It's
gamut
a
of
lot.
things to be able
Mm,
to say, but this is me and I stand in
mm,
that. So I
mm.
recognize who I am. When it comes to the masculinity part, it was a muscle that I had to work on, and I not in my own masculinity, but just understand. Like, so here's a scenario. I'm going to give two quick scenarios.
Go ahead, please. We
So
got time. Yeah.
one of them has to do with like on the creative side, the
Mm,
filmmaker part. So in Scales, there are actors who are playing characters that the characters identify as part of the LGBTQ plus community, but they in real
mm,
life are not.
mm,
And when we cast some of these actors, I struggled with
mm.
that because I was just like, oh my God, you sure you're going to be in this show? And you're like, wait, what's happening here? It was,
Yes, yes.
but I remember one of the actors saying to me, he says, well, one, Patrick, I'm an actor and I'm dedicated to my craft. But on top
Hmm,
of that, I know who I am.
hmm.
And it was so powerful for me to hear that. And this was a few years ago. So I was like 35 years old. So to
Mm-hmm.
hear someone say, it's like, I don't care what people think. He's like, I don't care. He was like, this is a good role. I liked the story you're trying to tell. I don't need to, after, if it airs or whatever, I don't have to go out into the world and say, I'm a straight male, or I'm comfortable with me. And
Mm.
hearing that actor say that, and well, actually, both of the actors say that to me, was a light bulb for myself. Is like, that's the part of being comfortable in your skin, too. Understanding, I know
Yeah.
what I look like, meaning I look
Yep.
in the mirror, I know my shade I'm black. I'm nothing
Yes.
else. And understanding too that I am a part of the LGBTQ plus community, which this is for another show that maybe you'll book me for later. But
Yeah, yeah.
when I did Scales season 1, there were people that I fully that didn't know my sexuality that I was close
Mm,
with, and that's a
mm.
whole box of masculinity and fearness and journeys that had to happen. And I think too, because a
Mm.
part of me was like, well, if I tell them, they may not want to be my friend because they're going to think that the times we hung out, it was something else. Like
Wow.
that's a whole
Yeah,
different box
that's
to
so much.
unpack.
Yeah, yeah, that's a lot.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's those journeys of, but once you, like your thing said, which I love, and you need to also got to send me the name of it, Everyday Courage.
Yeah.
I was like, put it on my
Yeah.
wall. But it's having
Yeah.
that courage to walk in your truth and walk in who you
Mm,
are, and just being able to own your blackness and understand that yes, masculinity, it it's a word that I feel should almost be removed from my vocabulary. What it's
mm,
not, because again, the same thing happens to women, black women or
mm-hmm.
just women in general. People will say, oh, they need to be more aggressive. Why are we putting
Yeah.
that there? Why it's
Mm-hmm.
feeding into that negative universe of things. So yeah, it's a journey. It's a journey, but
Yes.
I
Yeah.
it's the self awareness I think that you have expressed as well as myself. I think that's how we begin to continue to educate others, have the conversation, but also be open to conversations with the people who lead with no homo and
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
straight. Be be open and not quick to just shut them down. Because again, that was
Yeah.
a journey for me too. To be like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
this is a good time. This wasn't a teachable moment, but hey, let's get together and let's really talk about that and why you felt that you needed to do that. It works both ways. I need to hear you out,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to hear me out, and let's see where we can meet in the middle afterwards.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate that so much, Patrick. I love that story. And I think what is just that light bulb moment of like, yeah, I love the role. I love what you're doing. I know who I am. I have no problems. let's get to work. What are we doing? I'm just like, I'm just like, it seems so simple. Like, wow, so simple. Okay. Um, no, but that's truly powerful. I love that, and just like being really fully secure, like who you are. I love it. All right, Patrick. Well, thank you so much. I mean, if you got any other things to promote, share. What do the people need to know about you? This is your. I want to give you full carte blanche to just share whatever as we wrap up.
Sure. Well, thank you again. Thank you so much for having me. This is a full
Yes.
circle moment because again, I was a fan last year, and it's to be back here, to be here this year. It's great. I would just tell people if they want to. I love talking shop around film, TV, creativity. To look me up on the IG. Um,
Yeah.
I am Patrick Ladunas is my IG. You could reach out to me on YouTube, Scales the Web Series, if you want to talk about some collaboration or some, especially if you're in Atlanta. I'm always looking
Mm.
to connect with creatives there. But then on the flip side, Business Hat, if you want to talk strategy, consulting, that kind of thing too, there's going to be a fee. But
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
definitely
Yes.
looking forward to working. I'm looking forward to working and just having conversation all around. And if you're looking to hire someone to be your motivational speaker or to sit on your panel or something like that too, I'm available, and my information will be up on this platform. But Patrick
Yep.
Sutton, you can find me, and not to be like Kim Kardashian on it, but you can Google me, you'll find me. So
No, you can't. Patrick is Googleable. Googleable. Yeah, you gotta Google. No, I mean, also good follow on IG. Great follow on LinkedIn. You post some incredible content, and also outfits be looking so fly, Patrick. Like, oh my gosh,
yeah,
super
thank
fly.
you, man.
Yeah,
I'm style is one of my games. Like that's my
yes,
thing.
yes.
That's my thing.
And you
That's my
do it so well. I'm like, God damn, Patrick. Amazing. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. It is a full circle moment because we talked like a year ago, and I'm so glad that we were finally able to make it happen. And future collabs to come. I don't know in what capacity, but for sure. And I do have a ton of listeners in Atlanta, so y'all connect. So awesome. Well, Patrick, thank you so much. Listeners, everything, all of everything that Patrick shared, as much as I can, I'll put it in the show notes so you can check those out. But yeah, that was Patrick. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Later.
Bye.